Greetings, gamers. Tim here again, and I want to discuss uh, nothing major. I've just been under a lot of problems lately. I've had asthma, which has returned. I haven't had a major asthma attack since I was a kid, and I had one Sunday before this week, which today is 7/1/2020. Um, and I ended up going to the ER and going through all that chaos to get a breathing treatment and a COVID test, by the way. I don't have COVID, at least yet. Hopefully I won't, because asthma makes it more likely. Now, I've known that my asthma has returned because doctors have listened to my lungs for a variety of reasons. I'm not feeling great today, and today is supposed to be the day of our D&D game, which we moved online from playing face-to-face at the local comic book store due to uh, viral issues and the fact that several of us have people in our lives who are high risk, which includes my sister. She is high risk. My nephew is also high risk, and now I count because of the asthma as high risk as well. In addition to that, I had an ingrown toenail. Took me a month to get the doctors to do anything because they're like, oh, just go do this yourself. I did it. It didn't work. They ended up going in there, and in the middle of the procedure, they go, what is that? That's something you never want to hear a doctor say. What is that? You definitely do not want to hear it. Anyway, so they ended up removing more of my nail than they intended because there was apparently some sliver or splinter of another nail under there. I am still in pain. It has returned because the nail has mostly regrown on top of it, and the pain has also returned with it. And I went and saw Dr. Monday, and they said, oh, it looks good. I'm like, but I am hurting. I literally cannot sleep at night because I am hurting that bad. So, frustrating as much as that is, I called again today and dealt with the fallout of that, and it was not fun. And right now I'm having trouble breathing, and I'm in pain, but I'm going to try and continue my D&D game regardless. I'm not going to murder my player characters or anything like that because, well, except maybe one of them. For good reasons. Sometimes you don't tamper with really old magic unless you know what you're doing. But that's not here or there. I'm not really going to intentionally kill them. I'm going to give them a chance to be killed. But we'll see what happens. No, more seriously, on with gaming and game topics. I've got to do a little work, and I want to talk about cultural responsibility. And that is in response to a number of issues that have been ongoing, which also reflect cultural appropriation and a number of other things. For example, it appears that they're pulling off certain tabletop game rule books that have been deemed fundamentally as um, cultural appropriation books, in which they have created fantasy versions of uh, Asian or Arabic settings, and those have come up and be likely to be chopped, meaning removed and not sold anymore. And I want to talk about this because there is such a thing as writing with respect to a culture and not being a member of that culture, but it has to be done with a great deal of care and a great deal of respect and a great deal of research so that you are not appropriating anything, but showing respect for what you are creating. It's very good. In fact, it's highly suggested that you not only get people who are from that culture to be included as a collaborator in the writing of those projects, but also to um, not be just a token, not just be, well, I have this one person on there. No, they need to be integral to the creation of those cultural games. And that creates a problem for me because I don't want to write uh, about just white American cultural topics and heritages. I don't just want to write European fantasy role playing games or European science fiction role playing games from being descended from Europeans for the most part, like 99.9999%, just this significant statistical amount is pretty much all Northern European of my genes. On the other hand, I do wish to be culturally and emotionally and racially respected. Now, this also comes on the heels of issues of race in uh, the world's most famous tabletop fantasy role playing game. Even though its terminology is probably incorrect to some degree and it should be using species, they are fundamentally interchangeable. And with respect to the previous uh, intentions of designers, what has happened is over time we have encoded certain cultural aspects into certain racial species aspects into the game. And that is sometimes seen as negative. Uh, for example, orcs are all these barbaric, stupid brutes. Now, for me, growing up, when I started D&D, orcs were green. So there's no comparison to a human species other than that they were considered primitive. My ancestors at one point were primitive too, very primitive. I mean, golf evolved, I think, from batting around the skulls of enemies. So let's not talk about, my culture being truly terribly civilized because it took a very long time to get that way. And even then, it was full of colonialism and monstrosities that we don't want to talk about today. We should examine, though, at length. And it has brought me to the realization that in certain fantasy role playing games, I have made mistakes. But I don't want to make those in the future. I don't want to make those choices in the future. In fact, I'm going to fundamentally remove certain things from future gaming and tabletop play uh, with respect if we're playing fantasy or something similar. Is that I'm just not going to bother with culturally encoding anything specifically unless there's a good reason for it. For example, in my own tabletop fantasy role playing game, High Valor, dwarves are coded as very Norseman, very Nordic. Now they're coded that way, but that's not exactly their culture. It is a similar one. It is a fantasy one. They are similar to. There are also other humans that also are coded somewhat as Northern European, and some as Western European and Central European and Southern European. And I would like to note that nobody paid any attention to the fact that some of the Southern European people in my fantasy setting are dark skinned, and it's mentioned. Um, but nobody, my game's tiny. No, I have no significance to the greater impact of the hobby of a whole. And that's okay. That's fine. Because, for example, a lot of my art has women heroes. Not much is said about that. Nobody brings that up either. But I tried to be representative. I tried to do better than the antecedents that have come before me. And I will continue trying to do better and be more culturally aware and culturally sensitive to things I create. It is notable that in the current setting I use for the world's greatest tabletop fantasy role-playing game, that no species, no race is coded as more primitive, less primitive. There are some that vary. Some are civilized, some are not. But no entire species is any one thing. The player characters in the game have discovered allies among what are normally considered monsters, and they found enemies under what are normally not considered monsters. In fact, about the only consistent thing that has been true is that quite often undead are evil. That's not absolutely true, because not all undead in the setting are evil, because some are, but not all. But they have not yet encountered any of the ones who are not evil. So just the way they wandered around the world because I let them go. And they've in fact allied with kobolds, minotaurs, a variety of non-humans or non-human derivative species that are only vaguely humanoid even to begin with, including uh, all sorts of things. But one of the things I want to do is, and one thing I'm hoping that they will do with fantasy role playing, is let it be fantasy. And by that I mean is let people turn whatever fantastic species or race they want into a positive role model for their own heroic characters or their setting. Don't hard code it in any way. Don't say this is an absolute truth. In High Valor, there are monstrous creatures. Some of those monstrous creatures can be redeemed. In fact, it's mentioned in the book that you can go, like one has already been redeemed, considered a player character race. The others, not so much, but they can be redeemed. It is an option for player characters to do so. I left that little nugget in there because I'm hoping a player character will do just that and work to redeem a species. The only ones that I left that out for, besides undead, was the merc. And the merc they are a sort of a vaguely um, above instinctual level, smarter than a primate, not as smart as a human, rabid creature. They are literally just intelligent enough to make plans to do the most harm possible. But they have a tendency, the more of them you group together, the more dangerous they become to each other because they don't really understand working together. And they will chew through each other to get at you. They're literally, they strike out in all directions. They don't have focus. A single one is more dangerous than a group of them, which is a weird backwards way of handling it. But they're literally more than just the big bad evil demonic creatures in the setting are animating a body. It's not undead, but it's not really a sapient creature that can choose good or evil. It has no ability to do so. And unfortunately, I did code them as dark skinned, as tar black skinned. Because at the time when I originally created them, I was not aware that that was even a possibility for human skin colors. But I was not familiar with very, uh, very, very mainstream African descent lineages of certain tribes that were really, really dark skinned like that. I wasn't aware of that because I didn't have the internet when I first started writing High Valor. I didn't have the ability to look at those pictures and be aware that there are humans that come in those colors. So if I were to write a new edition, I'd probably hard code them as something completely different, blue or green or red or something that no human actually comes into. And I don't mean red as a Native American. I mean fire engine red. Although I'm really thinking more towards a maroon, purple, violet, something. you know. But the thing is I did not code them as a sentient species. They live in ruins. At best, they can pick up weapons other species created and kind of figure out how to use them, but they don't. They're not in any way civilized. They don't build anything. They don't construct anything. They don't support each other. At best, you have one that bullies the rest, and barely they can work together. But they are controlled by greater evils. But again, that was a failing on my part. And I recognize that as a failing on my part, as giving them a dark skin that apparently humans do come in. And I was just not aware of. Um, uh, but the truth is we are a better, more aware group of human beings than have existed on the planet for the most part. I think maybe our ancient ancestors who, saw Neanderthals and went, I get that. Might have been a little more enlightened, if we're not talking about rape, which I hope they didn't, but they're humans, so who knows, both sides. But in the end, the thing is we grow, we learn, we educate ourselves, we improve, and I find it important that we do so. This does not mean I think that we should take away the ability of a writer to create in realities that they create that resemble certain cultural elements, as long as they're not mocking those elements, as long as they are sensitive to those elements, and as long as they're not robbing someone who is capable of writing that, who is already working on that, of doing so. For example, I want to write a space opera wushu game. I've tried to find collaborators after collaborators after collaborators, and usually that falls through. I have had other ideas suggested to me to take it to a different level beyond wushu, which is Feng Sheng Bang, which I was not even aware of until someone who of Chinese descent basically brought that to my awareness, and I greatly thank them for that. But where it goes and what it is a fantasy space opera reality. It is inspired by as much mythology, as much folklore, as much writing as I can. And if somebody out there who's Chinese is writing that right now, I will throw my money at them as best I can as a poor creator myself and support them. Because I haven't started yet. I've got the basic ideas. I've done some playtests using those ideas. But those are my ideas. Those are my things. I am fascinated with those stories. I have read those that I can find translated by fans, translated professionally, and not just movies. I'm not a big, I'm going to go watch a movie and use that to create the game. I'm going to read books. I'm going to read about the culture. I'm going to read about history. And I'm working through mythology books and folklore books and culture books and history books. And I always do that when I sit down to write a setting, is I dig in my heels and dig in deep. I did that for my space opera game that I'm writing. And I did it for High Valor. Um, and I will keep doing that for any game I plan to write. I do not want to diminish the creativity of anyone out there. I don't want to say a Chinese person or a person of African descent or a person of Indian descent cannot write European medieval fantasy either. Then again, that's kind of oversaturated at this point. So it may be better if they choose something else. But I feel as long as they are being respectful, as long as they are being careful and research the information they're using, that is reasonably fair for them to do so, as long as they return that to the rest of us. That is not saying that I think it's my right to go do this, but it is my desire to go write this thing. Will it get written? I don't know at this point because I don't want to intrude on somebody else's space that they deserve rightly because of heritage or culture or history or ancestry. But at this point, I have not seen anybody talking about a game like I'm doing. I've seen some brilliant ideas for other games that are nothing like what I'm doing in forum posts, and I'm like, right, just sell this to me, but they haven't done it, and they're not they're not the same thing. Completely different, kinds of space opera or sci-fi or fantasy than I am doing. But I do want to make people aware that sometimes we have to learn to change. Sometimes we have to learn to look at, doing things differently. Maybe you want to play the most brilliant orc wizard ever. And so you should be allowed to. Maybe you want to play the dumbest elf barbarian ever. And you should be allowed to. Whatever you think would be fun to play that is not damaging or impugning someone else's culture, race, or religion. That's the important part. So as I said, this is a short thing. It's almost time for me to get my game going. About 30 more minutes away. So I'm going to end this. But I want you to think about cultural appropriation and cultural respect and cultural accountability. Because if somebody comes out and says, I want you to be held accountable to me for something I chose to put with joy in a game, then I can respect that. And they deserve to be able to say that. Will it hurt? It might. Will they be wrong? I don't know. Will they be right? I don't know. They might be. That's the thing. I give them the opportunity to do so by putting out my creative work to be shared with other people. And one of the things is always looking to the future that someday there will be just wonderful, amazing things out there that we love and adore and can share with one another. That's for everyone and it's not stepping on anyone's toes. I just read a Twitter post about someone about being upset because they had to hide their sexuality for fear of how they would be treated in public. And if any of you have watched it, my videos more than once, you probably know I am a Christian. And as long as it's consenting adults, I have no reason or right to say anything. Because as a Christian, as the kind of Christian I am, I will respect them, I will love them, and I will treat them with all the love Jesus told me to have. So yes, I'm talking about religion in a gaming podcast, but just briefly. You can ignore that. I respect people's views of all types. But I want to know that, as long as, we're talking about consenting adults, it's not my business to say anything. Not my right. And it definitely isn't my religion giving me the power or the desire to go oppress them because of that. But then again, I do require it to be consenting adults, sapient adults. So, because that's one of those things that's a pretty big stickler for me. In the long run, though, we've just got to do better as gamers, as a culture. 50% of new gamers or something like that are female. They're women and girls, and we're getting more of them than we've ever had before. And I know I've always encouraged. My sister's one of the best GMs I know. And I know I saw somebody say something, oh, I would never let a girl play in my game. Do not say that ever, ever in front of my little sister's gaming group. I promise you it will not end well if they ever find a body. That is a little bit of a joke. Anyway, peace and good gaming.